Hello, this is Dr. Amanda Stevens here for Module 3, Lecture 4. This is going to be a short review of growth charts and how to plot and monitor growth on them. Infant growth is a primary measure of health in infants. It's one of the ways that we track whether or not they're getting enough food, which is important for our perspective, but from all infant health perspectives, it's arguably one of their most important vital signs. And so we need to know how much are they supposed to be growing and are they following the appropriate trends. Growth charts are your easiest way of doing that. Oftentimes, early on in infancy, you will have most midwives and physicians will track based on grams or ounces that have been gained each day. But that does require you doing some math on your own, and that is usually only used for the first few weeks. So once they've regained their birth weight, which should be within the first 2 weeks of life, and as long as they've shown that that initial gain is good, then using growth charts is your best bet for tracking infant weight gain. Basically for the first 2 years of life is usually what we use these. So I am going to share my screen with you so that we can go through this together. So as you can see here, there are 2 growth charts that we are going to use from the World Health Organization. And I did choose the World Health Organization growth charts specifically. These ones say for Canada, but they're not just for Canada. These ones just were downloaded from the Canadian Dietetics Association. But globally, the World Health Organization charts are the standard. They were built off data of 5 different countries from around the world, and they were built based on predominantly breastfed infants. And so they're considered more of a standard of ideal weight gain for our infants and kids up to two years old. Whereas the CDC charts in the US are considered based on observational data and, excuse me, and potentially more formula-fed babes as well. So they do look a little bit different from each other, and these are considered the standard worldwide, which is what I use in my office and what I'd recommend you use as well. But just so that you know that there are a few different charts out there. You also notice that there is a girl chart and a boy chart. So use the appropriate chart for whichever sex this child was born at. And before we dive in on plotting, I want to point out, actually, and there are 2 different charts too, if you notice you download them. These ones, the percentiles that they show here are 3, 10, 25, 50, 75, 90, 97. You can get different charts that are kind of at different percentiles, but these are the ones I like, and it's pretty standard. The other thing is that these are based on bell curves. When we say 50th percentile, that doesn't mean you're half as good or half where you should be. That is a bell curve of data, meaning 50% or roughly half of your kiddos are going to be at that weight. So being at lower curves is not lesser than. We don't really care which curve this kid is on. We want to make sure that they are staying at least on their curve. Usually we will use the standard as their birth curve, but there are certain situations where sometimes that birth curve can be an over or an underestimation. For example, if there was a lot of fluids during delivery, like mom was on IV for a long time, sometimes you'll see that birth weight as exaggerated a little bit, so they might drop a little bit from that birth curve. Or if there was an issue with placental nutrition delivery in those last few weeks of pregnancy, then sometimes they'll be below where they should be. So either way, we want them to relatively stay on the curve that they were born on, if not the curve that they were at least 1 month. This does start at birth, so it's not necessarily appropriate for preemies, and you may need to go based on adjusted age for them, but we still want to see them following their curve. So I don't care if you're on the 90th or the 3rd, as long as you're following your curve, not dropping curves. So this is, I'm going to zoom in here just so you can see it a little bit better. But if we look at these curves, one thing you'll notice here that's kind of nice, we have weight and length on both sides. There's also a place to record specific notes and comments. These are kind of nice resources to print out for your families so that they can track them themselves and add them to their baby book. Length is, in my opinion, at birth, a more important measure for us as manual therapists relative to that in utero compression potential. But weight is the primary measure that we are going to be following for health purposes. Certainly you can follow them both, but weight is the one that we are going to be focusing on. So if I zoom in here, you can see that we have both pounds and kilograms, which is nice. And you can see those on both sides of my little chart here. So if we have pounds and kilograms on both sides, and they do relatively match up with where they should be on that curve. On the bottom, you're going to see their age in months. And so you can see there's kind of a tick at the midway point. So I'd like to say you could probably track weight on here about every 2 weeks. Doing anything more than every 2 weeks, you should probably get a specialized kind of zoomed in version of the chart, which if you Google, you'll find, or you should just be tracking it on paper and then comparing to it as opposed to adding a dot at every point. So if, for example, we're going to zoom in here a little bit more, just make this easier for you to see. If, for example, we have a babe who, when they were born, they were right at 8 pounds. If they were right at 8 pounds when they were born, they're pretty much going to be hanging out. I'll make my dot a little bit smaller here. But they're going to be hanging out right on, I believe that's the 50th line. Let's follow it. Oh, no, we're on the 75th line. So right on the 75th line at 8 pounds. Looks like a little bit more than 7 pounds would have been that 50th percentile. So right on the 75th. So for this imaginary baby, we want them to stay right on that line. And so if at 1 month, this babe is roughly, if we follow this over, just under 10 pounds. So that'd be like 9 pounds, and just closer to the 10 side there. I don't like to be crazy specific with my semantics on these ones, but if you use an app, you can be very specific with them. We usually use kilograms in our office. And so the same thing, it's just easier math for me. So either way, you want to see that that babe is following along on their appropriate curve, and staying this way. So in an ideal world, this babe's curve in those first couple months of life, we're just going to plot a couple circles so you can kind of see what that's supposed to look like. Now you'll notice there's a natural flattening out of that curve between 4 and 6 months. It's a good thing to note. Sometimes parents freak out a little bit when the rate of growth changes there. But the physical activity of the child and the normal healthy rate of growth change around 4 to 6 months. So they're not just skyrocketing at an exponential curve. With this, so this is what it should look like. It should look like this. It should not, as you plot these things out here, look like, okay, and then we started to trail into the 50th, and then we were somewhere in between our 25th and our 10th, and we just start swooping down. And we definitely do not want to see that one point is below another point. That's very bad news. That babe has lost weight, right? And so unless we have a known sickness or reason why we're seeing that, we definitely are raising some flags if you start to see this curve like this. The only way to get really good at this is to practice it, is to play with it. It's really quite self-explanatory. Once you've played with it a few times, I will give you a few practice questions, and you can expect to see this on your second test as well, and to be able to make some inference from it, right? From a clinical decision. For our purposes and our practices, tracking weight gain and working on infant feeding are definitely within the range of health care that we should be offering. Now, managing that babe once they have lost weight is something you are going to want to co-manage and likely make a medical referral for. Also, dietitians or lactation consultants may be on your team for that purpose as well. So I hope that you found that as a helpful introduction to growth charts. Print them out, play with them, ask your patients for some data or start tracking them on your files, as well as a nice, easy way to be that resource for your patients as well. See you next session.